Hey guys, so in this video we are going to be discussing absolutely everything that has to do with equipment in Dragon Ball Legends. Throughout my time here on YouTube, one of the most frequently asked questions in my comment section has definitely been, can you please explain how equipment works? So now with Legends, releasing their massive end of the year update, I felt it was a good time to go ahead and make this video. And before we actually jump into the content of the guide, the goal for me here is to make this as beginner friendly and comprehensive as possible for those players that maybe are just jumping into the game for the first time. So don't worry, we will go through things at a very, very high level. So first off, what is equipment? Equipment are basically items that you can obtain through various means that are able to be attached to characters in order to enhance their performance in battle, with each character able to equip up to 3 pieces of equipment at a time once they're fully skill boosted. So for example, take a look at this Frieza here. He has 3 equips right here. He has this one right here, he has this one, and he has the one in the middle. So you can also inspect and see what these equipments are doing for this character if you long tap on them. So you tap and you hold down your finger and then the details will pop up here. Keep in mind that you cannot equip multiple pieces of the same equipment into the same character, so that means, for example, if you have multiple pieces of this equipment, you can't equip more than one to the same character. So for example, if we go back to my equipment collection, which you get to by going to this screen and clicking on the equipment button right here, take this equipment for example right here. When you first obtain a piece of equipment, you will only have access to that equipment's first slot. Which is on this equipment, you can see here it gives 12.75% to strike defense. Now if we click on this slot to take a closer look, you'll notice that the value that we have assigned to our equipment is within a designated range. So it's going from 6% to 15%. This is completely luck-based and is what goes into farming equipment, aka trying to get the best possible rolls on the values that your equipment gives. This value in slot 1 is randomly assigned once we obtained our equipment and cannot be changed in any way. So we have our equipment here with only 1 value on it, and then from here you're able to upgrade your equipment, which will unlock a second slot, but in turn will cost some materials to do so. So if we go over here to the upgrade window, we click on this equipment and there's a little upgrade button that pops up below. We click upgrade and the game will tell you, hey, here's the materials that it'll cost for you to upgrade this equipment. So let's go ahead and click the upgrade button, and it will show the new stats that we were able to obtain in the second slot there. We can also take a look at what the possible rolls are for the equipment before deciding if we want to go through with the upgrade or not. And we can go back to the list here, and so for the third slot we can do the same thing, right? We can upgrade the equipment a third time, and to decide if whether or not we think it's worth investing the materials to upgrade the equipment, we can take a look at the possible rolls that we can get from that third slot. So obviously you can get Vanishing Gauge recovery from 6 to 15% here. So once you figured out that you want to upgrade this equipment, you can go back to the upgrade button and then go ahead with your final upgrade. And then once you've done the second upgrade, so you have all 3 slots unlocked, this quote-unquote completes the equipment, as almost all pieces of equipment in the game have 3 slots on them. Now, one common misconception that I see a lot is that people get confused thinking characters are only getting the boost from the equipment depending on what slot the equipment is inserted in terms of the character, right? So if we go back to the character team menu right here, and for example, we go over to Frieza and click on this first equipment right here, this equipment being in the first slot all the way on the left for this character doesn't mean he's only getting the buff from this first slot here. The character is still going to be receiving the benefits of all 3 slots. So he's getting the benefits from all 3 slots on this equipment. He's getting the strike attack, he's getting the blast attack, and the health buff. Something else to note about the basic equipment structure is that at the bottom, so if you go to the bottom of this equipment for example, you'll notice that there is a condition for the types of characters that are able to make use of this equipment. So in this instance, only characters that have the Lineage of Evil tag will be able to use this equipment. It's important to pay attention to this when team building, because if you have a piece of equipment that you want to use in your team, you'll not be able to use that equipment if the character doesn't meet the specific restrictions that are listed at the bottom of the equipment menu here. Additionally, you'll notice that the equipment we're looking at here has a letter Z+ on it. That is called the equipment rank, and if we go back to the equipment list and we open up the filter, you're actually able to see all the different types of equipment ranks that exist in the game. So obviously the lowest would be F, and the highest would be Z+. The way these rankings are determined is the game will take the overall values of each slot and compare it to the total values, and the equipment is then ranked based off of how close it is to being quote-unquote max rolled. An easy way to tell if an equipment is in good shape without only looking at the rank is by the individual slots themselves. So for example, taking a look at this equipment that we just rolled, every single slot is green, but then there's also equipment that have different colored slots. So if we scroll down a little bit here, we can see that this equipment has 2 gold slots, whereas this equipment here has 2 red slots. So a green colored slot means that the roll is not too good. A gold colored slot means that the value of that slot is pretty close to being at the maximum value. And a red colored slot means that the value is near perfect. So in order of worst to best, it goes green, gold, and then red. Lastly, there are 5 different types of equipment rarity. So back to the filter here, we can see that there's iron, bronze, silver, gold, and unique. By far the most common rarity that you'll run into is gold, and that is what we are going to be focusing on for the majority of this guide. Now that we have a basic understanding of what equipment is, let's talk about equipment rerolling. As I mentioned in the previous section of the guide, as of the day I'm recording this video on November 18th, 2021, the value of the first slot on each piece of equipment cannot be changed in any way. However, once you fully upgrade all 3 slots on a piece of equipment, you will have the option to re-roll either the second or third slots to try and obtain more favorable values. The catch with this is that the more often you do this, the more resources it will take to continue re-rolling the piece of equipment within the same day. Additionally, you need to have a special form of currency called a slot remover in order to even attempt to re-roll equipment. Slot removers can be obtained from a variety of places in the game, such as ranked PvP rewards, the Ultra Spacetime Rush shop, various exchange shops, and login bonuses. Alternatively, you could opt to use chrono crystals instead of slot removers to reroll equipment, but I personally don't recommend going down this path, as in my opinion, chrono crystals are better off being saved for summoning for new characters, especially from the perspective of a brand new player. As of the day I'm recording this video, there are 2 new forms of equipment rerolling that have been introduced into the game: the secured upgrade feature and the guaranteed upgrade feature. Oftentimes, when upgrading equipment, the new value would end up being worse than the value you originally started with. Well, with the secured upgrade feature, once you upgrade the equipment, you can opt to either keep the new value, or you can stick with the old value, meaning that you will never end up worse off than where you started. With the guaranteed upgrade feature, you can opt to spend significantly more resources in order to, as the name would suggest, guarantee a better reroll on either the second or third slot of your equipment. As of right now, I would recommend probably against utilizing the guaranteed reroll feature for beginners, as I believe the best course of action for a beginner is to obtain medium to high level rolls on a wide range of equipment instead of hyper-focusing on a few specific pieces of equipment. Alternatively, if you're someone who finds yourself using the same pieces of equipment all the time because you love using the same characters and the same teams, it might not be a bad idea to potentially invest in a few guaranteed rerolls. The last thing I'll say about guaranteed rerolls is that you really shouldn't be using this feature unless the roll on your equipment is already pretty high to begin with. The values on each piece of equipment are weighted so that it's harder to obtain higher values than lower values. So because of that, it's preferable to wait until the roll on a slot of equipment is already at a pretty high value before making use of the guaranteed reroll feature. Let's talk about Equipment Awakening. Equipment Awakening is a feature that is available almost exclusively through currency that you have to obtain through the Ultra Spacetime Rush mode. Now, this is a feature that is most definitely not beginner friendly, so I won't go super in-depth about this, but I still think it's important to discuss what it is and how it works. So the gist behind Equipment Awakening is that it turns a normal piece of equipment into a powered-up version of itself, while also sometimes adding additional restrictions to which types of characters are able to use it. In order to create an awakened equipment, you'll need to click on the button at the top of the equipment screen, and then from there, you can select which type of awakened equipment you want to create, and the game will then detail which materials you need in order to make that happen. The 2 noteworthy resources that you need for the Equipment Awakening are memories and fragments, which are items that, as I mentioned earlier, are obtainable from the Ultra Spacetime Rush shop. Once you've obtained the necessary memories and fragments needed to create the awakened equipment, you will also need a fair amount of other equipment to use as additional materials. And then after you've done all this, you should have everything you need in order to create your awakened equipment, and then from there you can obviously then just re-roll that similarly to how you would roll a normal piece of equipment. One thing I want to address as sort of a side point is I frequently get asked how to get more equipment storage space. And the answer is there are a limited number of ways you can obtain more storage for your equipment, namely the rare metal, equipment metal, and dual coin shops, as well as the real money shop. You can also get access to 400 additional equipment storage slots by purchasing Legends Pass, but honestly, for a beginner, this amount of extra slots is, I would say, far from necessary, so I would honestly prioritize the various exchange shops first if you find yourself running low on equipment storage. So now we're going to go through the top 10 equipment that I feel you, as a beginner, should prioritize obtaining and upgrading. Now, before we get into the list, I just want to emphasize that these pieces of equipment might not necessarily be the 10 absolute best in the entire game, but the way that I've built this list is from the perspective of somebody that has access to pretty much every piece of equipment in the game. You know, these are the 10 pieces of equipment that I find myself using the most frequently. So you're definitely going to get a lot of value from each piece of equipment on this list. And just the last thing to mention before we jump in is that this list isn't really in any particular order. It was definitely hard enough choosing only 10 pieces out of the multiple hundreds that exist in the game. So let's go ahead and jump into the 10 pieces that I have here. The first one is going to be the Battle of Saiyans equipment. This, you know, after we take a look at all 10 pieces here, this actually might be the single most used piece of equipment that I have and that I've used throughout the course of the past 2 years or however long this has been in the game for. But the reason why this is so good and so valuable is because it's not strict at all in terms of the restrictions of who you can equip this on, right? It's a Saiyan equipment, so you can equip this onto any Saiyan in the game. That's every single one of these characters can use this equipment. That's a ridiculous amount of characters in the game. So what it does is this is a purely defensive equipment. It's giving you base strike defense in slot 1 up to 18%. It's giving you up to 10% of blast defense for 15 timer counts when faced with a Saiyan, which is pure blast defense, or the same for strike defense. So the middle slot can roll one or the other. I think more often than not, you're probably going to get more value out of the strike defense, but it doesn't really matter which one you roll here. I think they're both useful. And then the final slot is health, which is always a good stat to have on equipment. So up to 10% health here. Just a very, very solid piece of equipment that you can never really go wrong with slapping on pretty much any Saiyan character in the game. The next piece of equipment is going to be this one, Hurry Up and Die, and the reason why this is valuable is because you can equip this onto any ranged type character in the game. So there's a lot of characters you can put this onto. So yeah, it's another one of these equipments where you have a lot of options here. This one, you get base key recovery up to 10% in slot 1. I feel like base key recovery is one of the more underrated stats in the game. It's very intangible because it doesn't actually translate to you doing more damage per card that you use, but overall I feel like the base key recovery does have a tangible impact on, you know, how the flow of battle goes. So slot 2 is special move damage, which is something that you don't really see super often on equipment. So you know, you have a character that does a lot of special move damage, like Yellow Full Power Frieza, or something like that, or you know, AoE damage as well, like Purple Demon King Piccolo. This is a pretty powerful stat to have, up to 12% in slot 2 there, and then you get up to a whopping 20% of base blast attack in slot 3. So this is a very offensively oriented, or offensive-oriented equipment here. That you can equip onto any ranged character. So this is, again, an equipment where I feel like you can put this onto any one of these characters and it's not going to be a bad decision. So a nice equipment there. So the next equipment is sort of broken up into 5 parts. I'm going to count this all as one equip. So you have this, Show Yourself Monster. So this one's able to be equipped on any extreme red character. There is a version of this equipment for all types. So there's extreme red, there's extreme blue, green, yellow, and purple. So all of these equipment, they're exactly the same piece of equipment. It's just the requirements to equip them onto each extreme class typing is obviously going to be different. So they're all the same, so we'll only look at one of them here. So Show Yourself Monster, the first slot you're getting up to 25% to both blast and strike defense. Second slot you're getting up to 25% to both base strike and blast attack. And then in slot 3 you're getting up to 12% base health. So this is, you know, when you're using an EX character on any one of your teams, this is pretty much the first piece of equipment you always choose every single time for that character. So if you ever use an EX character on any team, you're going to want to have at least one of these equipments each to be able to equip onto your character. So we have Show Yourself Monster is the red one. We have CU is for extreme in blue. We have Darn Androids is for extreme in green. We have I Think We've Got This is for extreme in yellow. And then we have Now It's Your Turn, which is for extreme and purple. So yeah, a lot of characters can use this. So I would recommend farming up one of each at least, if possible. But I'm going to go ahead and count these all as one equipment on the list, just for the purposes of having a list here. So the next piece of equipment we're going to talk about is Dr. Giraud's computer. So this is technically number 4 on the list. This one is able to be equipped by girls, androids, or regenerations. There's a lot of... Look how many characters this is. This is a lot. Again, another piece of equipment where I feel like you can just throw this onto any one of these characters and it's not really going to hurt you in any way. This also is pretty flexible in terms of the rolls that you can get here. So you can get either Blast or Strike Attack, Base Strike Attack in slot 1 and in slot 3 up to 13%, and then slot 2 is always going to roll both Base Strike and Blast Defense up to 10%. So it's just a pretty flexible equipment because you can have multiple versions of this equipment where maybe on one of them you want to try and get double Blast Attack, maybe on the other one you want to get double Strike, or maybe you want to go for one Blast, one Strike just to have a balance here. So a pretty flexible piece of equipment that I feel like is just always a solid option for any of those characters that we just looked at down below. Next we have Ha, which is for regeneration. Again, a lot of characters on the regeneration team, so they're all able to make use of this equipment here. So slot 1, again, special move damage. A lot of characters on the regeneration tag have very powerful special moves, namely, again, like I mentioned earlier, Purple Demon King Pickle has an AoE special move card. LF Perfect Cell, Omega Shenron, Ultra Omega Shenron, who's available right now for free in the game as long as you farm him up, has an AoE blue card. So again, a lot of these characters do have pretty powerful blue cards, so I think the special move damage, especially for the regeneration team, is pretty powerful. Slot 2, you have Base Strike Defense up to 15%, and slot 3 is really where the power of this equipment comes in and is very tangible, at least in battle when you're using this. You get up to 7% to base blast damage inflicted per regeneration battle member. So that, if you have this maxed out, just hypothetically, you can get up to 21% to pure blast damage from this one piece of equipment. That is absolutely insane. I think there's an argument to be made, even if you're using a character that's not blast based, like for example LF Half Corrupted Fusion Zamasu, this red one over here. He's a very, very heavily strike based character, but this equipment is so powerful and it's providing so much damage in terms of the blasts in slot 3 that I wouldn't even consider it to be a wrong move to maybe slap this onto this Zamasu, this equipment, because it's that powerful. So a very strong option for any regeneration character, I would say. Next we have this one. It's all up to my fists. Now this is a pretty unique circumstance for this equipment. This one is able to be equipped on any Goku character. So as you would imagine, in a Dragon Ball game, there are a lot of Gokus in the game. So no shortage of places where you can equip this piece of equipment here. So slot 1, you're going to have just a basic base strike defense up to 15%. Slot 2, you're going to have special move damage and ultimate damage up to 15%. Ultimate damage is really a very rare thing to see on equipment that isn't specifically for like a specific character, like unique equipment and stuff like that. And then in slot 3, you have Vanishing Gauge Recovery up to 15%. This is why this equipment is so good. Giving Vanishing Gauge Recovery to a character like UI Goku, to a character like Super Saiyan 3 Goku, to a character like the transforming LF Namek Goku, who people don't even want to attack anyway. This equipment gives them a smaller window of recovery time that they need to, build their Vanish meter back up. So if a character is scared to attack someone like Namek Goku because they're scared of the counter, you can use that to your advantage with this equipment by being able to regenerate your Vanish meter back. So an equipment like this is not really going to result in as much damage as you would get from an equipment like this, for example, but this is so powerful in combination with also the ultimate damage and special move damage being a pretty rare occurrence on equipment that I feel like this is an equipment that you should just have at least 2 of when you're running a team like, Sun Family or just Saiyans with a bunch of Gokus on it. So good equipment here for sure. Next one we have is Mind Your Own Business Tin Men. So this one is a pretty, again, flexible piece of equipment because it's only available for, or it's able to be equipped by all Saiyans in the game. So again, it's the same thing we looked at with the first equipment here, Battle of Saiyans. Every single Saiyan in the game can equip this, so it's very, very easy to slap that onto any of those characters. You're going to get base blast attack up to 13% in slot 1. You're going to get base blast defense up to 18% in slot 2. And you're going to get up to 10% to pure strike attack when a battle style melee member is a battle member, which is pretty much always going to happen, considering that you're going to want to put this on a melee-based character anyway, because it's giving you strike attack. So it's just a very flexible piece of equipment that you're getting a decent amount of pure stats from. And then you're also getting 18% to base blast defense, is not bad at all. And then you basically just get, like, you know, some free blast, which might not be that useful for you if you're running a melee-based unit, but it's just extra damage at the end of the day. So this equipment is very good. I find myself running this very, very often. Alright, and so we're at number 8 here, which is this is the Kaioken. So again, a very, very flexible piece of equipment. You can actually equip this onto any melee type character. There are 500 billion melee type. Look how many melee type characters are in the game. It's like half their game, pretty much. Melee type characters here. So I find myself using this almost every single time I make a team, but I'm a very, very, very melee heavy equipment here. The one thing I will note about this one is pretty notorious for being hard to roll, especially because the last slot has 2 options here. So the first slot, you're going to be able to get up to 15% to base strike defense. Second slot is up to 12.5% of base strike attack. And then here's where the things get a little bit tricky is in slot 3, you can get up to 18% for base blast defense or an additional 18% of base strike attack. So this equipment can have a total of 30.5 base strike attack, which is insane for an equipment as flexible as this. But again, right, the only thing you want to make sure of is in slot 3, you definitely want to try and aim for the strike attack. So it makes it a lot more difficult to roll when you have 2 options here. So keep that in mind with this equipment, but it's very, very powerful if you're able to get the right rolls on this one. Second to last equipment, this is probably... So in the beginning I said this is probably the one that I use the most on all my teams. I think either at the same level or coming up right behind it is probably this one, which is This Should Be Fun. This is an equipment that's been in the game for honestly, almost since the game came out. And they probably made a mistake with this equipment. I'm just going to be completely honest. They probably made a mistake when they created this because of how old it is and because of how good it is still. I would honestly recommend farming up 3 of this equipment. That's how good it is. But the reason why this is so good is because you're able to equip this onto any Saiyan again. So, you know, in terms of the characters that you can actually use this on, it's just limitless almost. And the reason why it's so good is because it gives 15% base blast attack, which is pretty good, but then it gives up to 12.5% to health. You don't see, you know, non-awakened, non-unique equipment give a health amount like this. Even like the EX equipments that we talked about earlier, they don't even give that much health. They only give 12%. So that's honestly I think that's probably a mistake. If they made this equipment right now, this would be 10%. There's no way it would be 12.5. This is a very, very high amount of health for just a normal piece of equipment like this. And then in slot 3, you're getting pure damage and, you know, inflicted to hybrid Saiyans, which I would argue is probably the team you want to target right now. Now remember, this video is being recorded right as the tier system comes out in PvP, so we don't know how dominant hybrids are going to be still in the meta, but at least right before the tier/boost system in the ranked PvP released, hybrids were the team that you want to beat. So this, on top of the fact that you're getting like so much health, and then you're also just getting some extra blast attack, this equipment is insane. I would actually recommend farming up 3 of this. So you always have this available for your teams because you can never go wrong using this. It's very, very powerful. And then last but not least, I put this equipment here. I'll send it back. I had a few candidates for my 10th slot in terms of the equipments that I have on the list here, but I ended up going with this one. This one is able to be equipped on any regeneration character. Again, a lot of villains and a lot of, like, you know, Namekians, Piccolos, stuff like that end up on the regeneration tag. You can see all these characters are all regeneration, so there's a pretty big batch of units you can use this on. And it's a purely defensive piece of equipment. It's actually kind of similar to the Battle of Saiyans one, but I think it's actually a little bit better but it is a little bit more specific because you have strike defense up to 15%, up to 10% health in slot 2. Now the last slot is where things become a little bit situational because it requires that you have a yellow element battle member on your team that you're using in the battle, and it gives up to 15% to pure blast defense per element yellow battle member. So for instance, if you're running double yellow, this is going to be, assuming you have a 15% max roll on this, you're getting 30% to pure blast defense. That's going to be a very, very significant change in how much blast damage you're taking from the enemy. And there's a lot of good yellow units for regeneration, right? I mean, you have this Legends Road Piccolo, completely free unit. His Zenkai Awakening is pretty solid. He's able to support the team. You have LF Piccolo. He has a Zenkai Awakening. I mean, he's going to be difficult for a beginner to use just because you need to have 7 stars in the LF character to be able to Zenkai Awaken him. You have Demon King Piccolo, who's also a very powerful Zenkai Awakenable character. So some pretty good yellow units for regen still that you can use on this on the team that you're using this equipment with to make use of this 3rd slot. So a very powerful option for the regeneration team. And that is going to be it in terms of the 10 equipments that I'm recommending for you guys to use. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part of the guide. At this point, I hope you guys have a bit of a better understanding of how the equipment system in Dragon Ball Legends works. I would say that the overarching effect that equipment has and the overall effectiveness of your team is actually pretty significant. Once you start getting to the point where you've established a main team for yourself and you see yourself running the same characters and teams over and over again, at that point I would recommend that instead of trying to go for a variety of equipment and spreading out your equipment rerolls, try focusing specifically on equipment that benefits your favorite characters and teams so that they can be the most powerful that they can be. And at the same time, you can start making use of the secure and guaranteed reroll features to try and potentially get those Z and Z plus ranked equipments for your teams so that you can be competitive in the top ranks of PvP. And the last thing I want to mention before wrapping up this guide is that getting good equipment takes time. Don't expect to jump in and automatically get a bunch of Z or Z plus tier equipments unless you're someone who is willing to invest a significant amount of real money into the game. Take your time with the rerolls and don't get carried away and start spending all of your slot removers in one day. Doing one reroll per day on some equipment that you would like to eventually use, I think, is an effective strategy to maximize the amount of value you're getting out of your slot removers. But at the end of the day, I wish you guys the best of luck with your equipment hunting. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.